My name is Twyla Mowery. I'm 41 years old, and I was standing at my mother's table on Thanksgiving with a pie server in my hand when my brother said it to his wife, straight across me, the way you'd talk over a chair. Take her key off that ring before she leaves tonight. She doesn't live here, and she never did the hard part. The hard part. I bathed our mother in the back bathroom of that house for 3 years. I learned which board in the hall creaks so I could get past it at 4 in the morning. I drove her to Millsboro every other Tuesday, and I sat in the lot with the heater running and the radio off. Nobody said anything. Angie put the dish towel back over the rolls. My Aunt Darlene looked at her plate like there was something written on it. And Dwight Kaiser, who has eaten Thanksgiving at that table since 1994, set his fork down on the cloth and left it there. There were 9 of us at that table, and 8 of them thought this was about a key. My coat was on the hook by the back door, and there was an envelope in the inside pocket. And inside the envelope were 2 pages I'd paid $1 apiece for at the county recorder's office. One of them is 51 acres of my mother's ground going out of her estate for $187,000. The other one is the same 51 acres going into a bank 11 days later for $340,000. Both of them have my brother's name at the bottom, different lines, same hand. Welcome back to Porch Stories, where the woman who spends her whole life catching the thing nobody can taste finally catches it at her own table. If your family ever split the work so that you carried it and somebody else counted it, you already know where this is going. Put it in the comments. I read them. Then subscribe, because $1 a page at a public counter is what this cost me, and my brother still thinks I had no business spending it. Let me take you back to July. In July, my life was small and quiet and mine, and I'd have told you I was doing all right. I run the water plant for the village of Wheatley, Ohio. 1,200 people drink what I sign off on, and I've had the license since I was 26. It's a cinder block building down by the creek with a metal door that sticks in the cold, and I'm there at 6 every morning of my life, holidays included, because water doesn't observe them. I pull my samples at the same hour, I write the numbers in a log with a pen, and I go home. Here's the whole job in one sentence. The thing in water that will hurt you never tastes like anything. That's it. That's the entire trade. Anybody can catch what tastes wrong. My dog rides along. Bitsy's 12, a blue heeler who went deaf about 3 years back and took it better than I did. She slept on the concrete floor of that plant under the running pumps every day since, and I've never once seen her startle, because there's nothing left to startle her. When I get out of the truck, I stamp twice so she feels it. That's our whole system, and it's worked fine. On the first Monday of the month, I go out to Cedar Grove in Millsboro, and I sit with Cleon Boyer, who is 91. Cleon ran the Wheatley plant from 1958 to 1991, which is to say, Cleon is the reason there's a plant. He asks me the same question every visit before he says hello. "What's your free chlorine running?" I tell him. He nods, like a man being told his children are fine. Cleon told me once that a water operator's real job isn't the water. It's noticing. Anybody can run a test, he said. Not everybody looks at a number they've read 400 times and asks it a question. I've thought about that sentence a lot this year. My mother was Arlene Mowery. She died 14 months ago at 79, in the front bedroom of the house on Quarry Street, where she'd lived since 1969, and I was in the room. She had a bird feeder off the kitchen window that she'd have crawled out there to fill if I'd let her. She made a soup out of nothing, a ham bone, a bag of dried beans, whatever the garden hadn't finished, and she called it the good soup her whole life, like there was another kind she was keeping from us. Our dad was Hoyt. He died in 2021 of a thing that took 9 days. He drove a road grader for the county for 31 years, and he never once talked about work at the table. What he talked about was the back place. The back place is 51 acres out on Hollowbrook Road, 4 miles from town. 40 of it is tillable, and Dwight Kaiser has farmed it since I was in grade school. The other 11 acres is woods, and a pond my dad dug out himself in 1981 with a rented machine and 2 weeks of vacation. There's a bench up on the north bank he built, out of a culvert form and a plank. It is the ugliest bench in the state of Ohio. I learned to swim about 40 feet from it, and I want to tell you how, because it matters later and I'd rather you hear it from me while it's still a good story. There's a shelf in that pond. You can walk out about 11 feet and then the bottom quits, and when I was 5, that drop-off scared me so bad I wouldn't go past my knees. So Wes, who was 10, walked the shelf backwards in front of me with his hands out every day, the whole summer, not swimming. Walking backwards in the mud with his arms out like a man carrying a pane of glass, so I'd always know exactly where the bottom stopped. He did that for a whole summer without being asked and without ever once making fun of me for it. He sold the ground under that shelf in March. Every March, Dwight Kaiser comes to the kitchen door with a folded envelope and pays the cash rent at the table. $210 an acre, 40 acres, $8,400. And he counts it out twice, out loud, so nobody ever has to sit there wondering. He's done that 31 years. My dad never once wrote a lease. He'd have thought writing it down was an insult to a man. Hold on to that one. It turns out to matter. Now my brother, Weston Mowery, 46, goes by Wes, and I need you to understand that people like him. That's not sarcasm, it's the fact you have to start from or none of the rest makes sense. Wes remembers your kid's name. Wes shows up with a truck when you're moving. Wes will stand in a church parking lot in February and talk to a widow for 20 minutes because she's got nobody to talk to. He runs Mowery and Son Excavating, gravel drives, ponds, footers, septic. He started it in 2009 and painted the name on the door of a truck, and the son in Mowery and Son is him. There was never a father in that company. Our dad laughed when he saw it and said it was good advertising, and Wes took that the way he took everything from our dad, which is to say he took it and he kept it. He's got Angie, who's 43, and cuts hair out of their back room, and 2 kids. Colt is 13, and built exactly like our father. Emmy is 9 and asks you a question and then waits for the answer, which almost nobody does. Here's the sentence you need. Wes said it to me at that kitchen table the first month our mother got bad, with his hand flat on the wood, in the voice he uses when he's giving you something. You do the hands, I'll do the numbers. And I took it as a gift. That's the truth, and I'm not going to sand it down. I've heard people tell these stories like they saw it coming. I didn't see anything. I was relieved. I had a mother who couldn't get out of a chair by herself, and a job where the state doesn't care what's happening in your house. And my brother stood there and took half of it off me, and I was grateful. He did the numbers. He set up the bill pay. He handled the Medicare letters. He talked to the lawyer in Millsboro when it was time to talk to a lawyer. And I did the hands. I did the mornings and the nights and the bath chair and the fingernails and the pills in the little box with the days on it. We were good at it. That's the part I can't get around. For 3 years, we were a good team. And I'd have told anybody who asked that I had a brother in a way most people don't. Our mother died on a Thursday in September. On the Saturday, in the back office of the funeral home in Wheatley, at 10 in the morning, my brother put a stack of papers in front of me and handed me a pen. We could do it all at once, he said, and be done. I signed 9 or 10 things. I didn't read one word of any of them. Death certificates, a release, something for the cemetery, something with a county seal. Somewhere in that stack, I signed a waiver of notice. I didn't know that on the Saturday. I found out in the spring, and by then it was the most expensive 4 seconds of my life. Nobody forged my name. I need to say that early, and I'll say it again at the end, because it's the whole spine of this. There's no forgery in this story. My signature is my signature. It's real, it's mine. It looks exactly like it looks on my driver's license, and it was given freely, at 10 in the morning, on the day I buried my mother, by a woman who trusted the man holding the pen. That's not a smaller crime. In some ways, I think it's a bigger one. The second half of the taxes on the back place comes due in July, and I've paid them in person since our dad got sick, not online. In person, at the treasurer's window on the first floor of the courthouse in Millsboro, in cash, out of a canvas bank bag with a snap on it that my dad used for 30 years and that still smells faintly like the inside of a truck. It's a stupid ritual. I know it's a stupid ritual. I did it anyway because he did it, and because for about 4 minutes a year it made me feel like somebody's kid. $1,318. That's what the back place costs to keep, and I had it counted out in the bag on a Thursday afternoon in the middle of July with 3 people in line behind me. The clerk at that window is Velda. She's been there longer than the carpet. She keeps a tin of whorehound drops by the stapler, and she pushes it across at anybody she can see bad news coming for, which is a thing I noticed about her years before I ever needed it. She took the parcel number and typed, and then stopped typing. "Hon, that one's already paid," she said. "Somebody paid it in June." I said that couldn't be right, because I'm the one who pays it, and she turned the monitor about 10 degrees toward me the way they do, which isn't really far enough to read anything but is meant kindly. Then she said the second sentence, and she said it gently, and it went through me like cold water. It's not in the estate anymore either. It transferred in March. There was a man behind me with a folder under his arm. There was a woman behind him with a toddler on her hip. My face went hot. I said something like, "Oh, okay, sure, I must have gotten mixed up." Then I put $1,318 in cash back into my father's bank bag and snapped it shut in front of 3 strangers and walked out to the truck. I sat there in the lot for a while. Bitsy put her chin on my leg because she can feel when the truck doesn't start. Velda had pushed the tin across the counter before she said the second sentence. I didn't notice that until later either. That night I got out my laptop at the kitchen table. And here's the part that still makes me angriest, how little it cost. The county auditor puts every parcel in the county on a public website. It's free. Anybody with a phone can look at anybody's ground. It took me 4 minutes. Parcel 19-004-00-003, 1.000, 51 2/10 acres, Hollowbrook Road. Transfer date, March 6th. Grantor, the estate of Arlene M. Mowery. Grantee, Hollowbrook Land Holdings, LLC. Sale price, $187,000. I read it 4 times. I'd like to tell you my hands were steady. They were not, and I'm not going to dress it up, because the whole reason I can tell you the rest of this is that I write down what's actually in front of me instead of what I want to be there. Hollowbrook Land Holdings, named for the road. He named it after the road, and our father is buried a half-mile up that road at Dutch Ridge. And I sat there at 11 o'clock at night, looking at a website and thinking about how a person picks a name. I didn't call him that night. I want credit for that, and I probably don't deserve it, because the reason I didn't call wasn't wisdom. It was that I couldn't have gotten a sentence out. I called him Saturday, and he was wonderful. That's what I need you to hear. He was warm and immediate and a little embarrassed, and he took the whole thing on himself before I'd finished the question. "Oh, Twy, that's on me. I meant to walk you through all that in the fall, and then you had that stretch at the plant and I should have sat you down." And then the explanation, which was smooth and reasonable and had a shape to it, the way things do when they've been said before to somebody else. The estate had debts. There were bills from the last year that didn't get covered, and there was the funeral, and there were fees. The house needed a roof before anybody could think about selling it. And a buyer came along at the right time, and it appraised where it appraised, and land out on Hollowbrook isn't what people think it is because of the wet corner on the north end, and he took what was offered because the estate needed to close. Every piece of that was almost right. I run a water plant. Nothing in my building has ever gone wrong all at once. It drifts. A number sits a hair under the limit for 11 months, and it doesn't spike, so nobody calls, and nobody comes. And one morning you look at a figure you have written down 400 times, and you finally ask it a question. So I didn't argue with him about the number. I said okay, and I said it made sense, and I asked how the kids were, and Colt had a wrestling meet Saturday. And when I hung up, I got out a legal pad and I wrote at the top of it, things I can hold in my hand. Because you don't get to be right about water by feeling strongly about it. If you've ever had somebody in your family explain something to you in a voice so kind you couldn't find the place to push on it, tell me in the comments what you said back to them. Mine was okay. Then I hung up and went and got a pad of paper. Subscribe if you're staying, because the next thing I found took 11 minutes and cost nothing. And it's the one that told me this wasn't a mistake. Ohio puts every business in the state on a website too, same as the parcels. Free, public, searchable. And I found what I found in a recliner in my own front room with a dog asleep on my feet. Hollowbrook Land Holdings, LLC. Filed January 30th. 5 weeks before the sale. The registered agent address was on Main Street in Millsboro, above the shoe store, which is Ottinger Tax and Bookkeeping, and Ottinger has done my brother's books since 2011. And the organizer on the filing was Ottinger too, which is ordinary accountants file these things for people all day long. That's not what stopped me. What stopped me was the date. A company doesn't exist, and then 5 weeks later it owns your mother's ground. Somebody decides. Somebody sits down at a desk in the last week of January and decides. The next Tuesday, I took a half day and went to the recorder's office on the second floor in Millsboro, which is one flight up from Velda and about 400 years away in atmosphere. It's all bound books and a copier that charges $1 a page and eats your ones about a third of the time. I pulled the deed first, fiduciary deed, recorded March 6th. Grantor, the estate of Arlene M. Mowery, by Weston H. Mowery, executor, $187,000. Then, because the woman at the counter said you may as well see everything that touched that parcel, I pulled what came after it. Open-end mortgage, recorded March 17th. Hollowbrook Land Holdings, LLC to an agricultural lender with an office in Millsboro. $340,000. Secured by 51 2/10 acres on Hollowbrook Road. Signed by Weston H. Mowery, member, 11 days. 11 days between selling our mother's ground for $187,000 and borrowing $340,000 against it. I stood at that counter and did the subtraction on the back of a deposit slip like it might come out different. $153,000. That number is not the crime. That number is the receipt for it. Because here's what a lender does before it hands anybody $340,000. It sends somebody out to look at the ground, and whatever that somebody wrote down, it was not 187. I paid $2, got my 2 pages, and the copier ate my 3rd one. And I stood there in a hallway that smells like toner and floor wax, and had the first clear thought I'd had in 8 days. My brother didn't spend my half of our mother's land. He posted it. I need to tell you about Dwight Kieser now, because I drove out to his place from the courthouse, and I've thought since about how close I came to not doing it. Dwight is 74. He and Juanita live on Dutch Ridge in a house with a porch on 3 sides, and Juanita brings pickled beets to any table she is invited to sit at, whether or not beets are wanted. Dwight has hands like something left out in the weather, and he does not fill a silence. If you ask him a question, he'll take about 8 seconds you're not used to giving anybody, and then he'll answer the question you asked, and not a different one. I told him I was trying to understand what happened with the back place. That's all I said. He looked at his boots for those 8 seconds. I offered your daddy $400,000 for that ground in 2016, he said. He told me no, and I never asked him twice, because he had his reasons, and they were his. Then he looked up. I offered Wes $400,000 in February. He told me it wasn't for sale. February, 5 days after a company got filed in Millsboro, more or less, though neither of us knew that standing in his drive. Dwight didn't know what he'd handed me. He was answering the question I asked, the way he does. Then he said the other thing. And this one moved everything into the present tense. There's stakes along the pond, he said. Survey stakes. Went in 2 weeks ago. Somebody's splitting the 11 off the 40. The pond. The 11 acres with the water on it, and the ugliest bench in Ohio. I asked him if I could use his kitchen table. Juanita put coffee in front of me without being asked, and I sat there and wrote down every word Dwight had said. while it was still what he'd said and not what I'd remember him saying. The probate file is public too. That one surprised me most of all, and I think it surprises most people. Every estate in this county sits in a manila folder on the second floor, and anybody can walk up and ask for it by the deceased person's name. The deputy clerk in probate is Corey France. He's about 30, and he keeps a jar of pens on the counter from 11 different insurance agencies, and he'll tell you which ones write dry if you're about to sign something. He brought me my mother's file, set it down on the table, and went back to his counter without a word. I found out later that isn't him being nice. It's the rule. It's my mother's file, and it's my county, and it was always mine to read. I read all of it. It took 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I got a parking ticket. The will named Weston as executor. That part I knew. What I hadn't known, because I'd never read a will in my life, is that our mother's will gave the executor power to sell real estate without coming back to the court to ask. Our folks did that in 1998, at the kitchen table, with a lawyer they trusted to make things easier on their kids. So there was no crooked appraisal in this story. There didn't need to be one. He didn't have to fool anybody. He just had to name a price and sign both ends of it. And the reason he could do that is that our mother and father sat down together in 1998 and decided their son wouldn't have to jump through hoops. That's the part I had to go outside and stand in the parking lot about. Then I found the inventory, 51 2/10 acres, Hollowbrook Road, valued at $187,000, which is what he sold it for, to himself, which is how the number in a court file becomes the number that was true. And then, about 2/3 of the way back in the folder, I found the 9th page of a stack, waiver of notice of hearing on inventory. Twyla Mowery, dated the Saturday after my mother died, in the back office of a funeral home in Wheatley, at 10 in the morning. I sat there and looked at my own handwriting for a long time. It's good handwriting. It's confident. You can see in the loop of the Y that the woman who wrote it wasn't thinking about the page at all, and she wasn't, because she was thinking about whether anybody had remembered to call her mother's cousin in Indiana. That waiver is why nothing about the sale ever came to me in the mail. Not a notice, not a hearing date, not a card. The court doesn't have to tell you what you've told it not to bother telling you. I signed it. Nobody made me. It took 4 seconds. I made copies of the whole file at $1 a page, $61. The machine ate 4 of my ones, and Corey France put them back in himself. That belongs in this story as much as the deeds do. The whole time this was happening, people kept being decent at me for no reason at all. And it caught me off guard every single time. 9 days later, my brother called me, and it wasn't about anything. That's how I knew. He wanted to know if my truck was still making that noise. He wanted to know if I'd heard that the school was going to 4 days in the summer, and then, on the tail of nothing at all, in the same easy voice, "Hey, were you up at the courthouse a while back?" I've thought a lot about what a normal woman says there. I said, "Which part of it?" And he said, "Huh." And I said, "There's 4 floors." And he laughed, and he moved right past it, like it was a chair in a hallway. That's a town this size. Somebody saw my truck in the lot. Somebody's wife does hair with Angie. It could have been 11 people, and none of them meant a thing by it. And it doesn't matter which one it was, because of what he did next. 2 days later, he pulled in my drive with an envelope. $8,400, cash, folded the long way, in the kind of envelope Dwight Kizzer has been handing across a kitchen table for 31 years. He set it on my counter and said, "That's this year's rent. Half's yours. I should have got it to you in the spring. Half. $4,200. And he'd brought me the whole 8. And he did not say why, and I did not ask." Now think about what that envelope actually was. That ground had not been in our mother's estate since March. He'd sold it out from under her in the spring. He'd mortgaged it 11 days after that. And here he stood in my kitchen handing me cash rent on it like nothing had happened, which means one of 2 things. Either he'd forgotten what he did in March, or he was paying me not to look. Men do not forget what they did in March. This is the place where a person can get carried away, so I'll stay on my own side of it. I don't know what was in my brother's head. I've never known. What I know is what was on my counter, and I know what I did with it, which is that I never spent $1 of it. It went in a coffee can on top of the refrigerator, and it's still there, and in June a court took it into account, and that's the only reason I bring it up at all. Up until that envelope, I was a woman reading old paper about something that was already over. After it, I understood I was standing in the middle of something that was still going on. Maxine Overholt has a probate practice above a bank in Millsboro. She's about 60. She charges by the quarter hour, and she has a window air conditioner she reaches over and shuts off when a client's voice starts to go, so they can hear themselves think. She did that about 9 minutes into my first appointment, and I've never forgotten it. She read my folder for 25 minutes and never said one word. Then she took her glasses off and laid out where I actually stood. Here are her 3 lanes the way she handed them to me, because they became my map. Lane 1, the sale. An executor is allowed to sell without asking the court, but he is not allowed to be the buyer. That's the oldest rule there is in this area, she said. When the man selling and the man buying are the same man, the price isn't a price, it's a decision. I could file exceptions, and the court could set the sale aside or make him answer for the difference. Lane 2, the office. He could be removed as executor and a successor appointed, and that's a separate motion. Lane 3, the ground itself. She could record a notice at the recorder's office that the parcel was in litigation, so nobody could split it or sell it or borrow another dime against it while this was pending. Then she put her glasses back on and told me the thing that turned it from a grievance into a clock. Your brother filed his final account on October 9th, she said. The hearing is December 8th at 9. If that account gets approved and he gets discharged, you're not out of options, but you're in a much worse room, and it costs you 5 times as much to be there. October 9th. Thanksgiving is the 27th. December 8th is 11 days after that. 11 days again. I don't think that means anything. I noticed it anyway. And then Maxine said the last thing, and she said it kindly, the way you tell somebody the weather is coming. He's going to need one more signature from you. There's a receipt and waiver that goes with a final account. If he gets that, this gets very hard. So I'd think about where he's likely to ask you for it. I already knew where. If somebody in your family has ever handed you a pen at the exact minute you were least able to read, tell me in the comments what you signed. I've stopped believing I'm rare. And subscribe, because the next thing I have to tell you about isn't from a courthouse. It's a spiral notebook that sat on a shelf in my own back room for 14 months because I couldn't make myself open it. When my mother died, the hospice nurse put her things in a plastic bag with handles, reading glasses, a hairbrush, a little photo of the 4 of us at the pond in about 1988, and a spiral notebook, the kind you buy for $1 in August. I put that bag on the shelf in my back room and I did not open it for 14 months. There's no better reason than the one you already know. I opened it the first week of November, at my own kitchen table, at 9 at night, with the dog asleep and the heat kicking on. She kept it 4 years, 1 line a day, 2 if it was a big day. Here's what's in a life, when a woman who never once said anything about herself writes down what happened. March 2nd, 2 cardinals. Twyla cut my hair on the porch. We had the good soup. August 6th, hot. Twyla put the fan in the window backwards, and it worked. April 19th, rain all day. Wes called. Pages and pages of that. Blood pressure numbers. Which of the neighbors drove by. What the feeder had on it. She noted every single time either one of us came, and she never once noted how long we stayed. I keep a log for a living. 1,200 people drink out of my log. In 3 years of getting my mother out of a chair, I never wrote down one thing about it. Not one date, not one number. And it turns out I didn't have to. She kept it for me. Then, 60 pages in her regular hand, no more ink on it than the cardinals got. June 11th. Wes brought a man in a white truck. They walked the back field about an hour. Wes says it is about drainage. October 2nd, the next year. The white truck again. Wes did not come in. January 14th. Told Wes the back places for both of them. He said he heard me. She was alive. She was in the front bedroom on Quarry Street with a bird feeder outside her window, and she told him, and he told her he heard her, and she wrote it down and never brought it up again to me or to anybody, because that was my mother, who thought that saying a thing twice was the same as calling a person a liar. And then, a month before the end, in handwriting that had started to come apart, Wes came. He is worried about money. I did not ask about what. Even then. She had a son sitting on the edge of her bed worried about money, and she didn't ask him about what, because she'd have thought that was prying, and she wrote down that she didn't ask, so that somebody would know she'd noticed. 3 days before she died, most of the way down a page, 4 words. Twyla is here. That's the last thing my mother wrote. I gave it one night. That's not toughness. It's the job. I have a plant to open at 6, and the state does not care what happened to you on Sunday. So I sat at that table until about 2 in the morning, and I let it be as bad as it was, and then I washed my face and slept 4 hours and went and pulled my samples. But I'll tell you what changed in that one night, because it wasn't grief. It was arithmetic. Up until I read that notebook, I thought I was looking at a man who'd made a bad decision in a hard spring. Estate needs money. Brother needs money. Brother is holding the pen. Brother does a thing he shouldn't and tells himself he'll square it up. June 11th was 27 months before she died. He wasn't drowning that spring. He was shopping in June, 2 years earlier, with our mother watching out the kitchen window, and he told her it was about drainage. I owe my brother a paragraph, and I'm going to pay it, because I'd want somebody to pay it for me. Mowery and Son Excavating was 4 payments behind in January. I know that now the way you learn everything in a town this size, which is slowly and from 3 different people who each think they're the only one who knows. The excavator alone is a $310,000 machine, and he bought it in 2022 when everybody was building, and it looked like it would never stop. It stopped. He had 2 men on payroll who'd been with him 9 years, and he did not lay them off, and I have never once heard him take credit for that, which means it's true. I can tell you the exact month my brother started going under, and I can tell you the fear was real, and I'd have helped him if he'd asked. None of that reaches June 11th. 26 months is not a bad spring. 26 months is a man deciding what a thing is worth to him, and then waiting. He called me the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and he was warm, and I was warm back, and I hate that I was good at it. He wanted to make sure I was coming Thursday. Angie was doing the bird. Darlene was bringing the green thing nobody's ever admitted to disliking, and Dwight and Juanita were coming because Dwight and Juanita always come. And then, on his way off the phone, in exactly the voice you'd use to ask somebody to bring a folding chair, "Hey, bring your license Thursday. There's 1 more paper for the court, and I want to be done with all of it before the 8th. Before the 8th. He told me his own deadline. He handed it to me over the phone, wrapped in a turkey, 10 days out. And he had no idea he'd done it because he had no idea I knew what the 8th was. I said, sure. I said I'd bring it. Here's the thing I'd want somebody to tell me, if I were the one sitting there listening to this. I set nothing up. I didn't pick the day. I didn't bring up the land with one single person at that table beforehand. Not Darlene, not Angie, not Dwight, who to this day doesn't know that what he told me in his driveway is the reason any of it came apart. I didn't ask anybody to be there who wasn't already going to be there. And I didn't say one word that put a pen in my brother's hand on a holiday. He chose Thanksgiving in October, when he filed. He chose it the same way you'd choose it, because a room full of people is the easiest place in the world to get a woman to sign something, since the worst thing you can be at a family table is difficult. The only thing I did was not tell him what the mail was bringing. Maxine filed on the Tuesday. Exceptions to the final account. A motion to remove him as fiduciary. And a notice recorded downstairs at the recorder's office against parcel 19-004, so nobody could split 11 acres off a pond while a court was looking at it. I went down and watched her clerk hand it across that counter, and I'm not going to pretend I felt nothing. For 8 months, every piece of paper about my mother's ground had gone in over that counter one direction. That was the first one that went the other way. Then I made 3 copies of everything at $1 a page. One set stayed with Maxine, one set went home with me, and one set I drove out to the scale house at the elevator and handed to Bobby Dieter, who has weighed trucks there since we graduated and who eats her lunch at 10:30 in the morning and always has. She didn't ask me one question. She said, "Do you want this read or do you want it kept?" I said, "Kept." She put it in the bottom of the scale house, safe under the calibration certificates, and went back to her sandwich. That's what a friend is. I didn't understand that until I was 41. Wednesday night, I laid out what I was wearing, a green sweater and jeans. I'm telling you that because there was a version of me that stood in that closet, thinking about wearing something else, and I'm glad she lost. I put the 2 pages from the recorder in an envelope, just 2, the deed and the mortgage. Everything else, the file, the notebook, Dwight's words in my handwriting, stayed home. Anybody can be handed 61 pages and feel nothing. 2 pages is a thing a person can hold. Then I sat on my own kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and Bitsy's head on my leg, and I said out loud, to a deaf dog, in an empty house, that I did not want to do this. That was Wednesday's allowance. Thursday, I got up and made the sweet potatoes. The house on Quarry Street smelled the way it has smelled on that day my whole life, which is a cruel thing for a house to do. Angie hugged me at the door. She had flour on her wrist, and she'd put the dish towel over the rolls the way our mother did, and I don't think she even knows she learned that. Emmy showed me a loose tooth with the seriousness of a woman presenting evidence. Colt shook my hand, which he started doing this year, and it about killed me. Wes was carving at the counter, and he called across the kitchen, "There she is," and put his arm around my shoulders for 1 second, and it was not fake. That's what I keep having to explain to people. None of it was fake. He was glad I came. Darlene brought the green thing. Juanita brought beets. Dwight sat where Dwight sits. The table was the table. It's a drop leaf my dad's mother had, and it's got a burn on the north corner from 1990-something, and a soft place in the finish where 31 marches of counted cash wore it down. And dinner was good. I ate. I laughed at the story Darlene tells about the raccoon in the church basement, which she has told every year since I was 6, and which now has details in it that could not possibly have happened. Emmy asked me whether fish drink the water they live in. I said I'd think about it and get back to her, and she said okay, seriously though, and I told her yes, and she was satisfied. I want that hour in here, because it was real too. Whatever else that table was, for 1 hour, it was still my family, and I knew going in it was the last hour of it, and I sat in it on purpose. Then Angie got the pies out, and Wes went into the front room and came back with a folder. He was easy about it. He put it beside my plate, not in front of me. He laid a pen across the top of it. "One more, Twy," he said. "And then it's done, and none of us ever has to think about it again." Darlene said, at the table, "Wes," and he said, "It's 2 seconds." And I picked up the pie server because Angie had asked me to cut, and that's when he said it to his wife, across me, without any weight on it at all, the way a man mentions the gutters. "Take her key off that ring before she leaves tonight. She doesn't live here, and she never did the hard part." Nobody said anything, and in that quiet, I understood that he wasn't even being cruel. That was the mistake I'd been making for 8 months. He wasn't punishing me. He'd just gotten all the way to a place where it was true, where 3 years of somebody else's mornings had turned into a woman staying at a house rent-free, where he could say it out loud in front of the man who'd paid cash at that same table for 31 years and expect the table to hold. So I set the pie server down and I picked up my coat off the hook and I took the envelope out and I put 2 pages on the table face up and slid them toward the middle where anybody could reach. "That one's the deed to the back place," I said. He signed it on March 6th as the executor of Mom's estate. $187,000. Nobody moved. "That one's a mortgage on the same 51 acres, 11 days later. He signed that one too, on a different line, as a member of the company that bought it. $340,000. I didn't say anything else. I didn't have to. Darlene picked up the second page and put on the glasses that live on a chain around her neck, and Juanita leaned over to see, and it went down the table the way a plate does. Then Dwight Kieser said the thing that ended it, and he said it to his own hands, and he did not stand up, because Dwight has never stood up to say anything in his life. I offered your daddy $400,000 for that ground in 2016. And I offered you $400 in February, Wes. You told me it wasn't for sale. That's what it sounds like when a room turns. It isn't loud. My brother went through his registers the way I've since learned people do. The order is the whole tell, so I'm keeping it. First, reasonable. There's a lot in this you don't understand, Twy, and I'd have explained every bit of it if you'd come and asked me instead of going to the courthouse behind my back. Estates are complicated. There were debts. I asked how much the debts were. He said it wasn't a number you could just say at a table. It was $26,400. It's on page 2 of his own inventory. Second, injured. Do you know what that year did to me? Do you have any idea what I was carrying while you were? He stopped himself. Everybody at that table heard where that sentence was going. Third, blame, and this is the one that had teeth, because it had been sharpened somewhere. You lived in that house 3 years and never paid a dime. You want to talk about what the estates owed? And Angie said his name. Just his name. Once. Low. Wes. She hadn't said anything up to then. She was standing behind her chair with a pie server in her hand now, because somebody had to keep the day going. She looked at the 2 pages. Then she looked at her husband, and she said the thing that I think actually broke that room. You told me your mother wanted us to have it. He didn't answer her. He answered me instead, which is its own kind of answer. And he went to the last place there is. Dad named me. It's in the will. I'm the executor of this estate, and I'm not going to sit at my own table and be. I'm going to give you the exact thing I said, because I've been asked a lot, and there's a version going around that's better than what came out of my mouth. He named a son, I said. He didn't name a buyer. And Wes said, you do the hands, I do the numbers. That was the arrangement, Twyla, and you never asked me one question about it in 3 years. I said, I'm not asking one now. Then I took the house key off my ring. It takes longer than you'd think. The ring is stiff and my hands weren't good and the whole table watched me do it. And I got it off and I set it down on the cloth beside his plate, not in front of him. Beside his plate, where a man sets his own keys down when he comes in. You wanted it off my ring, I said. It's off, and then the last thing, and I said it quiet, and only he was meant to hear it, and about 4 people did. You could have asked me, Wes. I'd have signed the whole 40 over for the 11 with the water on it. I got my coat. Darlene got up and came with me, and held my arm going down the back steps like I was the elderly one. Behind us, Angie was telling the kids to go on upstairs in a voice I recognized, because our mother had that voice too, and it is the sound of a woman putting children somewhere before something happens. I drove home the 4 miles with the window down in November because I wanted to be cold. The rest of it moved at the speed paper moves, which is not the speed anybody wants. The December 8th hearing got continued. That's the first thing that happens, and it feels like nothing. In January, the court removed my brother as executor and appointed a successor, a lawyer in Millsboro who had never met either one of us, which by then felt like the kindest thing anybody had done all year. Then it took until June. Maxine told me at the start that it would, and I didn't believe her. In June, it settled. The company deeded the 51 acres back into my mother's estate. The mortgage got paid off out of my brother's share, and what was left of his share after that, and after the surcharge for the difference, was not very much. The survey stakes came out of the ground along the pond in July, and Dwight pulled them himself and stacked them behind his machine shed, and never told me he'd done it. Juanita told me. There was a referral to the prosecutor's office. It's still sitting somewhere. I've stopped calling about it, and the reason isn't flattering. I got the thing I actually wanted, and I'm not going to stand here pretending I'm owed a second one. Mowery and Son Excavating didn't survive the spring. The excavator went back on a Tuesday in April on somebody else's lowboy. I didn't watch, and I didn't celebrate, and I'd have paid money to make it not be true. And both of those things can be facts at the same time. Angie and the kids are still on Quarry Street. That's what the estate's doing with the house, and it took a conversation with the successor, and a conversation with Maxine, and one with myself in the truck, and I'll tell you my reasoning in one line. Colt is 14, and Emmy is 10, and neither one of them signed anything. I see them. Emmy comes out to the plant on Saturdays and asks me questions I have to look up, and I do look them up. Nobody says one word about their father in front of them, and that's not me being big about it. That's a rule I made, and I enforce it on other people too, including Darlene, who tested it once. Wes and I don't talk. He texted me in August. It was long, and it was careful, and some of it was true. I got about 4 lines in, laid the phone face down on the arm of the chair, and went out and topped off the dog's water dish, which did not need it. Then I came back in and sat down and read the rest. I haven't answered it. I haven't deleted it, either. There's a difference between a door you shut and a door you stop walking to. When the estate closed, I took one thing out of that house, and it wasn't the money. I took the table. 2 men and a truck on a Saturday in September. And it's in my kitchen now, with the burn on the north corner and the soft place in the finish where Dwight Kaiser counted out $8,400 in cash 31 times, so nobody would ever have to wonder. That's the table my mother wrote her notebook at. It's the table my brother put his hand flat on and told me I'd do the hands. I eat at it every day. It's too big for the room. I don't care. The back place is still the back place. Dwight's got the 40 in beans this year, and he brought the envelope to my kitchen door in March and counted it twice out loud, even though it's just me now. And I told him he could stop doing that, and he said no. Cleon Boyer is 92, and still asks me my free chlorine before he says hello. I told him the whole thing one afternoon at Cedar Grove, all of it, and he listened the way he listens, and when I was done, he said, "Well, you looked at a number you'd read 400 times. Above my kitchen sink, there's a page from a spiral notebook in a $5 frame. It isn't the June 11th page. It isn't the January 14th page, either the one where she told him and he said he heard her. Those are in a folder in a drawer where the proof goes. The page over my sink says, March 2nd, 2 cardinals. Twyla cut my hair on the porch. We had the good soup. I didn't frame the page that proved anything. I framed the one where nothing happened. I used to think the paper you had to watch out for was the kind with somebody else's forgery on it. Now I know the dangerous page is the one you sign yourself, with your own good handwriting, on the worst morning of your life, because a man you love is standing there saying it's nothing. That's my story. 51 acres, 11 days between one signature and the other, and one spiral notebook that sat on a shelf for 14 months. So here's the one thing I'd ask you to actually do. If somebody hands you a stack of papers on the worst day of your life and shows you where to sign, ask for a week. You don't need a reason, and you don't have to be suspicious of anybody. A week isn't an accusation. It's the cheapest thing you will ever buy, and I paid $153,000 for 4 seconds because nobody ever told me I was allowed to say it. If you know a woman who did the hands in her family while somebody else did the numbers, send this to her tonight. She'll know which part is hers. And tell me in the comments what you signed without reading, and whether you ever went back and found out what it was. Then subscribe, because there's a next one, and I'd like you in the chair for it. That's all of it. Thank you for sitting with me on the porch tonight. I'll see you in the next one.